Okay, this is cryptography in one lesson, so I'm going to cover quite a lot of stuff. A lot of you will probably know most of this, so if you get bored, grab a beer and go and chat to somebody else outside. I won't be offended if you leave. Okay, so I'm planning to cover some definitions. There's going to be very little math in this, unlike my last session. One-time pad, symmetric encryption, asymmetric encryptions, hash salts. I gave up on streams, I decided it was boring, and then a conclusion. This is a love story. This is the story of the brilliant and beautiful Princess Alice. Alice is writing a secret letter to her beloved. Now, cryptography is the study of transforming readable data into a form unreadable without some secret knowledge. Confidentiality is the protection of data from unauthorized disclosure. The brave and handsome Prince Bob. During his visit, they discussed her two passions, weddings and cryptography. Encryption is the transformation of data using a secret key and a known method. A key is any sequence of data, usually kept secret, that is used in encryption protocols. And a protocol is a procedure for handling encrypted data, usually a multi-step message exchange. The plain text is the original thing to be encrypted. For our purposes, it can be a message, a video file, a live audio stream, an entire hard drive, or any data. The ciphertext is the encrypted data after you've done your process, and it can be stored in one location or be transmitted by some means. And so Alice gives her encrypted letter to Captain Harry to convey to Prince Bob. Decryption is reverse encryption on ciphertext to retrieve the plain text. Alice does not know that Captain Harry is a spy for King Mallory. Now, an algorithm is an exact sequence of transformation steps to encrypt data. An algorithm may be used within a protocol. The sender and receiver are the entities doing the encryption and intended decryption. They could be the same entity in some cases. For example, if you encrypt your own hard drive and later you need to decrypt it so you can use your data. So King Mallory wants Princess Alice to marry his son, Prince Oscar. And Mallory has copied Alice's letter and then sent it on to Bob. But Mallory is unable to read the letter. Now, an attack is an attempt to decrypt data by an unauthorized party. A man-in-the-middle attack, which is what Mallory has just done. The attacker intercepts and then passes on communications between the two parties. Cryptanalysis is the study of methods to decrypt data when the key is unknown, otherwise known as a crack. So what is a one-time pad? This is the first sort of main type of encryption I'm covering. You need to know about random sequences of bits, which are very difficult to generate for humans and for computers, because we tend to think in certain patterns and computers are very deterministic. So to come up with a random number generator that's good enough to use for cryptography has been quite difficult. There are some of them out there, but there are, of course, always a few people to say that even those are not really good enough. If you do need one, you need to make sure that it's generally accepted as being good enough for cryptography use. So Alice's cunning plan is to use cryptography to write letters to Bob. And she created a one-time pad using the first letter of every sentence in Martha's complete royal wedding book. Of course, you already be aware that this is not good from a randomization point of view, right? So the one-time pad is a key used for encrypting messages where the protocol requires used portions of the key to be destroyed after they're used. So the Nazgul sorcerer Azog proclaims himself to be the best cryptanalyst in the world. Mallory gives Azog the letter from Alice, and Azog soon guesses that Alice is using a one-time pad. So he thinks to himself, what sort of book would be popular with young princesses? So after a while, he managed to try decoding using the wedding book, and is finally successful. So he tells Mallory that Alice and Bob are planning to meet at Snowdon Mountain. And no, I'm not at all subtle by the art. So Mallory knows the secret rendezvous point for Alice and Bob. Then he sends his best knights to capture Alice and bring her to his castle. Alice is captured, and Bob arrives to see her being carried off in the distance. Poor old Alice. So, a one-time pad, if it's not properly random, an attack might be successful, as in this example. So, it's very critical that the data be random. Obviously, you need to initially transmit your one-time pad between the parties using it via some other secure channel. Each byte of the pad is used exactly once ever and then destroyed, and it is provably secure against any opponent. But the main drawback is you need a different secure channel to transmit it, and if you need to transmit a huge file like 4 gigabytes of data, then your one-time pad has to be 4 gigabytes long. So why is it secure if used correctly? Since the sequence is only used once, there's no way to verify that your decryption is correct. So if you have an encrypted string, as an example, it could be decrypted as Bob needs gold urgent, or it could be attack plan day. Now, you can't compare your one section that you decrypted against another one and see if the same decryption worked in both places, because it's a different key across each section. So there's no way to ever crack it, literally, no matter how much computing power you have. One use you could make of one-time pads is to transmit your symmetric key, which would be much shorter, and then you can use that key, but then you don't have this absolute certainty that you're secure. So symmetric encryption is called that because the same key is used for encrypting as for decrypting. The advantage is the key size and the message size are not very large, but your key exchange is a problem, the same as with a one-time pad. So here we go. Poor old Alice is locked in her bedroom in Mallory's castle with her lady-in-waiting Carla. So Alice comes up with a new plan to send secret messages using playing cards. She asks her guard for cards to play with Carla, and she creates the key by randomly shuffling one deck and then copying that exact sequence of cards into another deck. The prepared deck is now used to encrypt the message. The receiver can decrypt if they have a deck in the same sequence. Now, substitution is when you mix every bit of the plain text with a bit derived from the key according to certain rules. Transposition is when you take those bits that you encrypted and you switch them around in various ways. That's normally done multiple times during an encryption. And then padding is when you add some zeros or random data just to disguise the length of the message or just to fill up the blocks that you're working with. Security by obscurity. This is a favorite snark of security professionals. It refers to a system which is presumed to be secure because its algorithm is not public. This is not good security because encryption can often be broken even if you have no idea how it was encrypted. It seems logical to a beginner that if your key is secret and your algorithm is secret, you have 2 layers of protection. The opposite is usually true. Your secret algorithm can also almost certainly be guessed by professional attackers. There are only so many basic techniques any algorithm has to use, and you have to be using those techniques in some combination. So if your algorithm is secret, it may have some flaws that you can't see, but other people can. You are not cleverer than every one other person in the world put together. So researchers and sassy hackers are always looking for new attacks and weaknesses in protocols and algorithms. This is a good thing because they publish results and allow problems to be fixed. Weaknesses may be exploited by criminal hackers for years before the public is aware of anything being wrong. And corporations are often very annoyed when weaknesses are exposed in their software. And history has shown that most corporations don't ever fix a weakness until after they are publicly shamed. They are not legally liable for any losses to their customers from these weaknesses, so they don't really want to spend a huge amount of money fixing them. Freedom of speech is very critical in this domain because corporations in some countries have used the law to suppress the truth about their weaknesses, but this does not stop any criminals from actually exploiting them. A good algorithm has been reviewed and tested in public. Every opinionated cryptographer in the world has had a chance to win fame by finding any weaknesses. That doesn't make it certain there's no weakness, but it's better than the opinion of one person or one team on the issue. Especially if that team is reviewing their own work, because it's normal to be blind to flaws in your own creations. Even if you have a good algorithm, it has to be implemented in software, and it's extremely easy to make a mistake at this point. And even experienced software engineers should not code their own encryption software unless they really know a lot about cryptography. Now, I know I've belabored this last point, but I actually had like a test case of somebody who knew nothing about cryptography, and even after reading this, they still didn't understand why an algorithm is good that it's open and not a secret. So I'm really going on about it because people don't get it. It's not an intuitive thing to most people. So Carla is allowed to roam the castle and befriends the cook Frank. She gives him the second deck of cards to smuggle to Bob. So the second deck is now the symmetric key. Frank hides the deck of cards till morning. Eve has been watching him and takes the cards to Mallory. He realizes the importance of the deck and makes an exact copy of it. He will now be able to read Alice's messages and send false messages in her name. There are a multitude of different algorithms for symmetric encryption. Each algorithm uses a secret encryption key as the starting point. The message to be encrypted is scrambled with a key in a particular way defined by the algorithm that allows it to be de-scrambled again later if somebody has that same key. It is useful for large stores of data because the size of the encrypted data is not much larger than the original, which is a good thing if you're trying to encrypt an entire hard drive. One of the many things that's important when you're designing an algorithm is to pad your data, especially if the message is short. This allows subsequent manipulation to use a sufficiently long sequence to be secure. You want to include things like timestamps, message counts, or other tricks to make sure that people can't just replay your attack by sending the same message on Tuesday that you sent on Monday and getting the same money twice. And data should be inverted, transposed, swapped around, cross-multiplied in multiple steps, again and again, to resist encryption. Now, obviously, unlike in a one-time pad, you're going to have many sections of a long message will be encrypted by the same key. So one possible solution is to feed each chunk in as a sort of starting point for the next chunk. But obviously then if you lose one of those chunks, you won't understand anything that happens in the rest of the message. AES is supported by the NSA, but we don't just take their word for it. It's been reviewed by many outside people, and that is the published standard, which if you're going to use symmetric encryption, it's probably the good one to use. Alice makes plans for Bob to approach Mallory's castle early Tuesday morning. She and Carla will sneak out of her room after plying the guards with wine. Bob is excited to finally meet the princess of his dreams. Oh yeah, whoops, I made a mistake there. That story changed halfway. Anyway, his faithful retainer Trent will knock on the castle door to distract the sentry at the critical moment. Mallory is able to intercept and decrypt the message from Alice using his copy of the card deck. He creates a fake letter from Alice telling Bob the plan is to be Monday morning instead, because Prince Oscar is going to forcibly marry her on Monday afternoon. Mallory knows Prince Bob will have to change his plans and possibly be rushed into a mistake. You'll notice there's no authentication that this message has really come from Alice except for the key. So early on Monday morning, Bob sends Trent ahead to talk to the sentry, who will not recognize him. Bob will sneak to the side of the gate, ready to attack if required. Mallory's arch is waiting for Bob and Trent. Trent is mortally wounded, and Bob is injured, but escapes. All is now lost for Alice. So, asymmetric encryption. This is the very tricky one. It's extremely difficult for most people to understand, and it does a lot of different weird things, which I'm going to cover some of that. It's called asymmetric because the encryption is done, the encryption and the decryption are done by different keys. So imagine there's a magic padlock there's a looping shackle which extends from the body and can either be open or locked. And there's a keyhole on either side of the body. If you lock it from the red side, using a red key, it can only be unlocked on the blue side by the corresponding blue key, and the other way around. So you can now create as many red keys with your name on as you need and put them in the town square. Anybody who wants to send you a letter can lock the box with one of your red keys. Only you have the matching blue key, so only you can unlock that box. If Alice locks a box using Bob's red key, it will only open to Bob's blue key, not Alice's blue key. If Bob replies to a message, he will lock a box with one of Alice's red keys. She will then unlock with her private blue key. Alice is overcome by despair and agrees to marry Oscar. Mallory agrees to give her time to send invitations and create her wedding gown. Alice realizes she needs more allies and better communications in future. She studied the books in Mallory's library and decides to use asymmetric locks for secrecy in future. Bob has independently decided the same thing. So, a sender has a public, which I called red in my example, and a private key, which is blue. Each one is just a very large number in reality, and the numbers are used in a specific algorithm to encrypt and decrypt data. Red and blue are not standard terms, I just kind of invented them. Now, there are several mathematical operations that are much easier to do in one direction than to reverse. You may know square roots. If you've ever multiplied two numbers, it's much easier to do that than to calculate the square root, although there is actually a known operation for that. But there are other things where there is no known operation to reverse certain things, except brute force trying of every single key till you get the answer. And that is, those things are used for asymmetric encryption because you can, even if you have the public key, that doesn't help you figure out what the private key is without brute forcing it. One of the biggest threats with asymmetric encryption is that somebody will find a mathematical trick to easily calculate the private key. So just because there's no mathematical technique that we know of to reverse something doesn't mean somebody isn't going to figure out something in the future. In fact, algorithms relying on the difficulty of factorization, there's already a known solution, but only on quantum computers, which haven't really been built yet. Elliptic curve algorithms, which is what Bitcoin uses, do not yet have a known attack. The controversial case is where people suspect NSA of deliberately creating a version of elliptic keys that has special starting conditions because they know a way to crack the elliptic curve with those conditions. Who knows whether that's true? It's not like the NSA would ever spy on us, right? Once you have your keys, which you create by some mathematical method, I'm obviously not going into that, you can just publish them on a key server. So the key server itself normally has public and private keys, so you can be sure you're dealing with a server you want. Normally your encryption software will come with some key server locations built in, and you can just use that. So your key server is now the town square from the example, where people can just download your red key if they wish to send you a message. Now the way this is normally used in practice is that the asymmetric key is used to encode a symmetric key because that turns out to be much cheaper and simpler and shorter than encoding the entire message with asymmetric encryption. So Alice is taken under guard to the market to buy some materials. She arranges with a merchant to deliver asymmetric locks and key-making tools hidden in the materials she ordered. The HTTPS protocol is called SSL. You've probably all used that. That's an asymmetric algorithm. It's considered fairly weak by modern standards, but it's still tough enough that it's not entirely pointless. The list of trusted key servers usually comes with the browser software, and there have been cases where the key servers have been corrupt governments that can't really be trusted. So be a little bit suspicious of SSL. Hash functions, okay, this is not really a form of encryption, but it's used in encryption a lot. The purpose is used for is for integrity, to ensure that data was not corrupted or changed. Non-repudiation, in certain circumstances, the sender can't afterwards claim they didn't send that message. To go back to my example of the keys, you can prove you wrote a letter by punching a hole in it, and then you lock something through that hole with your blue key. Anybody who gets the message can take one of your red keys, and if lock unlocks, they know that you must have locked it with your blue key. If they then fake a letter and lock it with one of your red keys, nobody else will be able to unlock that lock with one of your red keys, so they'll know it didn't really come from you. So a cryptographic hash takes a plain text or ciphertext of any random length and condenses it to a specific length. There's various lengths in use. The output will just look like a random sequence, but it's not actually random. The point is to do the condensing in a way that cannot be reversed. So if you have the hash, which you sometimes call the digest, that doesn't mean you can calculate what the original message was. And the hash algorithm isn't normally a secret. Sometimes hash have keys, but usually it's you just follow the algorithm. And so if you have the same message, you can generate the same hash. The important thing is that it's very difficult to make a collision. In other words, if you know which hash you want the answer to be, it's very difficult to create a text that comes to that answer, because if you take somebody's message and you change even one digit in that message, the hash is going to look totally different. That's the whole point of this. So you can't just take a message you got saying, pay Gavin $10,000